So when it's cold outside, does this little guy actually need a heat lamp? Well, we want to talk a little bit more about this and talk about the ins and outs of heat lamps and talk a little bit about heat lamps themselves, which ones are good, which ones are bad, and which ones are going to cause problems like potential fire risks. Hey everyone, it's Tim from Linessa Farms Specialty and Heirloom Livestock. Thanks for joining us again today. We get a lot of questions about heat lamps, if they're necessary, if they're not, and then of course we always get questions about the fire hazards associated with utilizing heat lamps. I wanted to address some of these issues here today. So we just had Thanksgiving a few days ago. We're getting ready to really get into the cold months here in Northwest Indiana. So when you think about heat lamps, essentially they can be necessary for a short period of time right after birth. Now we like to use a couple of products that help us regulate the temperature of our heat lamps and help determine when they come on and when they go off. There's also a few things that you need to consider when it comes to heat lamps as far as which ones are safer, which ones hold up better, and which ones that you're probably going to want to use. Now when it comes to general heat lamp use, we recommend that when the babies are first born and go into the lambing jug with mom, that you go ahead and utilize a heat lamp for the first few days of life. And what this does is essentially it allows that baby to get into a position where it can start to regulate its body temperature better, and it just gives that baby a little bit of a boost. Now there are some negatives to consider when it comes to heat lamps, other than the safety issues that we'll get to here in a minute. So the first thing that I want you to consider with these heat lamps is we consider them a temporary source of heat just until that baby gets old enough to regulate its own body temperature. Usually if the baby gets cold, it's going to nurse. The fluid from mom, the milk from mom will warm that baby up and the baby will be absolutely fine. We've had lambs and goat kids out in temperatures as long as they're guarded from wind and precipitation. We've had them out in cold barns that were down to and below zero with no serious consequences. However, that very first stage of life, that very first day or that very first couple of days, that baby could use a little bit of a leg up and sometimes they can have some trouble regulating that body temperature. The problem occurs when they get chilled and they can't warm themselves up. You may see them balled up, you may see them shivering, and this can cause some pretty serious issues. It can cause this cascading effect that can cause them to go down, get sick, and potentially even pass away. If the baby gets too chilled, they won't eat, and if they don't eat, they get weaker, they get more chilled, and this thing just gets out of control. So again, we do think that you should utilize heat lamps. After that, you can probably get away from it. If you are in a temperature or in a very cold environment where you feel that you need to utilize heat lamps after that first couple of days of life, after they've left that lambing or kidding jug, you can do so. We just recommend that you keep your heat lamps sequestered to your creep areas where only the babies can get to them. It's going to decrease your overall risk for damage to the heat lamp. We don't want to start any fires. We don't want the animals to shock themselves. So there's 3 points that I want to talk about when it comes to heat lamp safety, and that is exposure to dry material, the risk for fire, electrical cords getting too hot, not using specific gauges, and then the different types of heat lamps themselves. So the first one we're going to talk about is actual risk for fire due to contact with dry material. If you're new to Linessa Farms, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it. If you'd like to learn more, go to www.linessafarms.com. Our online store is at this address as well. We feature Foundation feed, which is some of the best formulated feed in the United States for sheep and goats. With it being the holiday season, you can check out very special unadvertised sales that are on there. For instance, we have Toltrazerol on our website right now at 50% off. We'll be having special sales throughout the holiday season. So make sure you check us out again at www.linessafarms.com. So this may seem absolutely nuts to you. This is one of the old style quote unquote barn burner heat lamps that I have here with the cheap aluminum, I just burned my fingers, with the cheap aluminum housing and this little wimpy gate. And these things are well known to getting tacoed and smashed by adults. And everybody tells you that these things are barn burners. I mean, heck, we call them barn burners. We have a brand new 250 watt bulb inside this thing. And I have actually taken dry hay and I have packed it in here, or pardon me, dry straw. And I have literally packed it in here. And as of right now, this has been sitting here for over 20 minutes. You would expect this to actually start burning, correct? And you can see when I pushed it in here and it actually came in contact with the bulb, it is just now starting to smoke. Now, what are the chances of it actually coming in contact with the bulb in your barn? Probably pretty low, but you can see it doesn't take too much time at all for this to actually come in contact with the bulb itself and you're going to start having some serious problems that are going to start a fire. Now, what are the chances of it actually coming in contact that much? Probably pretty low, but again, you never can tell. I want to take a moment to talk a little bit about electricity. These are thermocubes. I'm a huge fan of these. These are going to help save you money and save you from getting your animals too hot or allowing them to get too cold. So what the thermocube does is it actually automatically turns on like a thermostat if the temperature drops below 35 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 2 degrees Celsius. You plug this into a regular outlet, and then anything you plug into this will actually turn on if it reaches that cold enough temperature. You can get these set for different temperatures. If you check out the description below, we have a link where you can find these. These are really, really good. They last a really, really long time. Some of these that we've had them for a matter of, I believe 4 or 5 years without any issue. The next thing I wanted to briefly talk about is gauge of wire. Now, we talk a lot about fires that are happening because of contact of dry matter with bulbs. And that is true, but the other thing that can happen is you can use cheap extension cords and actually cause a fire with this as well. A general good rule of thumb that you want to follow is the gauge of wire that is used for the heat lamp itself. Ideally, we want you to plug this directly into an outlet, but if you can't, we want you to use an extension cord that is the same gauge or larger than the cord that is on the heat lamp itself. So in this case, this cord right here, 14 gauge wire, you would want to use 14 or larger in order to plug this in if you're going to use an extension cord. In this case, we have a 14 gauge extension cord, and that will work fine as well. 14 gauge and 14 gauge is fine. You wouldn't want to use like a 16 gauge or an 18 gauge because that would be too small. And what ends up happening if I use a cheap extension cord like this and I actually plug this heat lamp in, it's going to draw too much amperage, and what's going to end up happening is this thin, flimsy wire is actually going to heat up, and it can heat up to the point that this wire itself actually catches things on fire. Again, when you're using extension cords, make sure that you use the same gauge wire or larger. Actually, these things are well known for the actual housing to fall off. I've seen them fall off. I've gone out and seen bulbs on the ground. As you could see from me touching it with the straw, it doesn't take very long for the straw to actually touch this, and it's going to cause a fire. So these aren't too bad if you really honestly can keep them secure, can keep them hanging, keep them in an area and protect them from getting crushed, and keep them from coming in contact with dry material. They're not too awful bad, but again, for my money, I just go with a little heavier duty set, and that would be the Premier. So this is the exact same thing. It holds the exact same bulb. These are made by Premier. You'll see the link to these in the description below. I don't take money from Premier. I don't take money from anybody. I just like these. These are the ones that I use. This is a nice hard plastic shell that will not melt. The bulb is secure in there. It's not going to fall out even if it gets broken. And if I squeeze that, I'm squeezing that as hard as I can, and it's not gonna break. An animal can come up and hit it. Nothing's gonna happen. They do come with these nice heavy duty links, which work really good. These carabiner type links, and the latching mechanism itself is actually built into the top of the heat lamp. They're vented well. We've been using these for years, and we really, really like them. The thing that you probably know if you've been using heat lamps is in order for it to get down to a level where it actually benefits the animal, you have to hang it pretty darn low. So I like the fact that I can hang this low. Mom can come up and rub up against it, and she's not actually going to damage it. The problem that you run into with this thing is if you hang it low enough that it actually does any good for the baby whatsoever, Mom can easily come up and just completely smash this thing. They just aren't worth it. Spend a little bit more money and get the good one. Now, when it comes to super duper heavy duty heat lamps, this is about as heavy duty as it gets. And this is another product from Premier. This is a carbon fiber element that's actually in there. You may have seen these on Premier's website or on other people's websites. There's a few things that I like about this, and there's a few things that I don't. The main thing that I do like about this is the fact that it is really, really well made. You can't get this shroud off of here without actually taking out some screws screws. The other thing that I really like about it is it's got a built-in kill switch, so if this thing falls and tips to the side, it will actually kill it so it doesn't work anymore. The things that I don't like about it, I'm gonna go ahead and plug this in for you so you can actually see it. This thing gets hot. And when I say hot, I mean so hot that you could light a cigarette off of it, so hot that you could fry an egg off of it. I just plugged it in, and it's not gonna take very long of me holding this thing in the correct position for it to start working. Okay, I just turned the switch on, and if you watch it, you can see the carbon fiber element is now getting red hot. This thing puts out a unbelievable amount of heat. Even here being this close to it can get a little uncomfortable. So the downside with these is you've got to hang, they get so hot that if anything touches this shroud after a little bit of time, once this thing gets to full force, full heat, it will burn it. The other thing is because you have to hang it up so high, it does tend to disperse heat in more of a larger area. Overall though, I just think that you have to hang them up so high, it really doesn't get heat on the ground to the animals as well as the regular heat lamps do. Whew, that thing is hot. If I were heating a small room, or if I had some lambs in an enclosed area that I knew I could hang this up that they absolutely couldn't get to, I would probably consider it. I suppose if you had an area that 100% guaranteed only lambs could get into, you could probably get away with hanging this thing about this far off the ground. But no kidding, if you have chickens or any kind of animals that are going to possibly poop on this, or an animal that's going to try to land on it, you are in big, big trouble. So while these do work really, really well, they do get really, really hot. A couple things to keep in mind. The main one is you can burn the snot out of yourself with this thing. They are relatively expensive. They kind of sell them as not putting out any light, but this does actually put out a little bit of light with the carbon fiber bulb. I do like that it's got a safety mechanism. When I tip this, you can see it immediately went out as soon as I tipped it. And I actually have to have this thing upright in order for it to work. And it does have a nice on-off switch right here. So completely up to you. Hello, babies. No, get down, guys. Get down. All right. So in this case, we have our heat lamp in, and you can see what I like to do is I just have some metal wire, some braided wire fencing, and you can just hang it and adjust the height as you see fit. So there it is, plugged in. I'm Tim from Linessa Farms, specialty in heirloom livestock. Thanks for joining us again today, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.